The heavy oak doors of the foyer swung open, and there she was. 3 Louis Vuitton suitcases hit the marble floor with a heavy thud. A local sheriff's deputy stood awkwardly behind her. Clara walked right past me, dropping a torn, yellowed piece of paper on the console table. It was a temporary custody agreement from 4 years ago. A legal ghost. She looked at me, a slow, venomous smirk spreading across her face. "Pack your bags," she said. "Lily's real mother is home." My heart hammered against my ribs, but my hands were completely steady. I reached into my pocket, hit record on my phone, and pushed the door open a little wider. "Make yourself at home, Clara," I said, my voice ice cold. "You will need to enjoy it before you lose everything." The heavy oak door clicked shut. Clara's heels echoed across the marble as she marched toward the guest wing, barking orders at the air. I stood perfectly still, letting the recording save to my secure cloud drive. I am Felicia. I am 28 years old, and I spend my days managing behavioral crises as a high school counselor. You learn a lot about human psychology when you spend 40 hours a week de-escalating explosive teenagers. You learn even more when you share blood with a psychopath. Watching Clara drag her luggage across my pristine floors, my memory snapped back to my 24th birthday. I had saved for months to buy a stunning white silk dress for a charity gala. 5 minutes before my ride arrived, Clara walked into my bedroom, glass in hand. She tripped over the perfectly flat carpet, sending a tidal wave of red Cabernet straight down my chest. She gasped, covering her mouth with manicured fingers, offering a hollow, breathy apology. I spent the entire night scrubbing the ruined fabric in my tiny bathroom sink until my knuckles bled. Today, I just watch her scuff the marble, knowing she is walking straight into a trap she cannot charm her way out of. The financial extortion is not a new trick, either. 3 years ago, I dated a wealthy investor named Bradley. Clara cornered him after a dinner party, threatening to invent a vicious rumor about his business unless he paid off her $5,000 luxury shopping spree. Bradley panicked and handed over his platinum card. He thought he was buying peace. I dumped him the second I found the receipt. You cannot negotiate with a parasite. You cut them off. But her ultimate masterpiece was my college graduation. The exact second the dean called my name, Clara collapsed in the middle of the crowded bleachers. A textbook, perfectly timed fake panic attack. She thrashed and wailed until the paramedics strapped her to a gurney, stealing every single camera flash and ounce of oxygen in the stadium. My parents abandoned my ceremony to follow her ambulance. Back then, I rode in the back of a taxi alone, staring out the window, quietly accepting my role as the invisible sister. Not anymore. Clara looks around this mansion and sees a gold mine. She sees William as a walking bank account and Lily as a pawn to secure her lifestyle. She thinks she holds all the cards because of a piece of paper she signed 4 years ago. She thinks she is a master manipulator. She is wrong. Those decades of being drained and humiliated forged my ironclad mindset. To me, Clara is not a threat. She is just a giant, greedy toddler waiting to be disciplined. And school is officially in session. For the next 48 hours, Clara turned William's home into her personal stage. She hijacked Lily's playtime, physically wedging herself between William and his daughter on the living room rug. She wore a sheer silk slip dress to breakfast, making sure to stretch right in William's line of sight while he poured his coffee. It was pathetic. You might watch this and think she was a desperate, misunderstood mother fighting for her broken family. Let me completely shatter that illusion. Clara does not love Lily. She does not love William. She loves possession. When she walked out on them 4 years ago, they were just heavy luggage tying down her party girl lifestyle. Now, seeing the very man she discarded treating her little sister like an absolute queen broke her massive, fragile ego. Even worse, her glamorous social media lifestyle was a complete mirage. She was drowning in unpaid bills. She did not want a family reunion. She wanted a financial bailout. The breaking point hit on the second afternoon. William took Lily to the park, leaving the two of us alone in the house. Clara cornered me in the sunroom. The fake, breathless victim voice was gone. She locked the heavy mahogany door behind her and slapped a piece of paper on the glass coffee table. It was a bank wire transfer form. It was already filled out. The amount on the bottom line stared right back at me. $50,000. "Sign it," she snapped, her eyes wide and manic. "That covers my maxed out credit cards and the lease on my car. You wire the money right now, and I pack my bags. I leave you and your little stolen family alone forever." I stared at the paper. I slowly picked up my teacup, bringing it to my lips. "And if I refuse?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Clara smiled. It was a dead, hollow smile. She pointed toward the massive marble staircase just outside the open double doors. "If you refuse, I walk out there and throw myself headfirst down those stairs. I will break my own arm if I have to." By the time the ambulance arrives, I will be sobbing to the police that William shoved me. He will go to jail, and Lily goes into the system. Your choice, little sister. My stomach physically twisted at the sheer evil of it. She was willing to risk her own neck and traumatize her own child just to ruin an innocent man's life. I set my teacup back on the saucer. The porcelain clinked softly in the quiet room. My phone sat right next to it. The screen pitch black. The voice memo app had been running for the last 10 minutes. She just handed me a recorded felony extortion confession, on a silver platter. I need until tomorrow to move the funds, I told her, keeping my expression perfectly blank. Clara snatched the paper back, her chest puffing out with triumph. She walked out of the room thinking she had won the lottery. She had no idea she just locked the door to her own prison cell. The double doors of the ballroom slammed open, bouncing off the walls with a violent crack. The string quartet stopped dead. Clara stood in the entryway, chest heaving, her expensive mascara already running down her cheeks. She did not waltz past security at the front gate. $100 bill shoved into a caterer's hand and a ride up a greasy service elevator got her into the most exclusive charity gala in San Diego. She stumbled forward, playing the frantic, desperate mother to absolute perfection. William, she wailed, her voice cracking over the shocked whispers of the crowd. How could you let her do this? She stole my family. Dozens of the city's wealthiest elites turned their heads. The judgment in their eyes was heavy and immediate. Clara's panicked gaze darted around the room, locking onto William, and then landing squarely on me. She wanted a scene. She wanted me to cower, to run away crying, to hand her back the spotlight she craved so desperately. My heels stayed glued to the floor. My heart rate stayed perfectly level. When you deal with cafeteria brawls and hysterical teenagers for a living, a grown woman throwing a tantrum in a designer gown barely registers. I stepped past William, walked straight to the center podium, and wrapped my hand around the microphone. A high-pitched screech echoed through the speakers, instantly silencing the room. I looked directly into Clara's wide, wet eyes. I want to take a moment to thank our host tonight, I said, my voice projecting crisp and clear across the silent ballroom. William is a remarkable man. 4 years ago, he stepped up to protect his infant daughter when her biological mother abandoned them both to chase wealthy men and designer bags across Europe. We are all so grateful for his relentless dedication to his real family. The silence in that room was absolute. Then, the collective gasp hit. A woman in the front row actually covered her mouth. Clara's fake tears stopped instantly. The flush of dramatic anger completely drained from her face, leaving her pale, hollow, and trembling. The entire room stared at her. Not with the pity she expected, but with absolute, crushing disgust. Her victim mask shattered into a million pieces, right there on the carpet. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. She spun on her heel and sprinted back toward the service doors. The sound of her frantic footsteps swallowed by the heavy, judging silence of the crowd. The house stayed dead silent for 2 weeks. Clara vanished into the city. I knew her well enough to know she was just reloading. The strike finally came on a Tuesday morning in the form of 3 sharp, official knocks on the front door. A woman in a stiff gray pantsuit stood on the porch, clutching a clipboard. She introduced herself as Mrs. Higgins from Child Protective Services. An anonymous tip had come in accusing me of physically abusing Lily. It was a calculated, lethal strike. A pending child abuse investigation means an immediate suspension of my school counseling license. My career, my reputation, my entire life's work hung in the balance. Clara thought this was her masterpiece. She thought the sheer terror of losing my livelihood would finally force me into submission. She forgot I handle state mandates for a living. I know exactly how this agency operates. I invited Mrs. Higgins into the kitchen, gesturing to a stool at the marble island. I opened my laptop and logged straight into the mansion's network security portal. Clara is a lot of things, but she is certainly not a criminal mastermind. On her way out the door 2 weeks ago, she connected her phone to our guest internet network to submit that supposedly anonymous online tip. The router logged the exact timestamp, the device name Clara's phone, and the destination website. I cross-referenced the log with the foyer security camera footage. It showed her standing by the door, typing furiously on her screen at that exact millisecond. 1 click, and the printer hummed to life. I slid a pristine, undeniable stack of digital evidence across the counter. Mrs. Higgins adjusted her glasses and read the logs. The polite, bureaucratic neutrality instantly drained from her face, replaced by tight-lipped irritation. State workers despise being used as pawns in toxic family games. She pulled out her cell phone, dialed the number from her file, and put it directly on speaker. Clara answered on the second ring, a smug little greeting ready on her tongue. She got a state official instead. This is Mrs. Higgins with Child Protective Services. I am closing this investigation immediately, due to fabricated evidence. I am also noting your internet address in the state registry for filing a malicious, fraudulent report. Do not ever weaponize this agency again. Higgins ended the call before Clara could even draw a breath to stutter. She snapped her briefcase shut, gave me a curt, respectful nod, and walked out the front door. Her exit left the foyer perfectly quiet. William's lead attorney stepped out of the adjacent study, holding a thick manila envelope. The trap was fully sprung. Making a false child abuse report is a severe crime in California. We had the digital proof. The attorney dropped the envelope onto the table. It contained a felony coercion ultimatum. Clara was entirely out of moves. William's attorney stood at the head of the dining table, his posture rigid and uncompromising. He slid a thick stack of freshly printed legal documents across the polished mahogany. The terms were brutally simple, designed to leave absolutely no room for negotiation. Clara signs away all maternal rights, relinquishes physical and legal custody of Lily, and agrees to a strict, lifetime non-disclosure agreement. In exchange, we agree to lock the voice-recorded extortion attempt and the state-verified router logs in a vault, keeping them out of the hands of the local district attorney. It was a choice between absolute surrender and a guaranteed state prison sentence. Clara stared at the paperwork. The arrogant, untouchable queen who strutted through these halls just weeks ago vanished completely. Her hands shook so violently her gold bracelets rattled against the tabletop. She looked at the attorney, then darted her gaze to William. And finally, her wide, bloodshot eyes locked onto me. The tears started falling. These were not the fake theatrical sobs she used to manipulate the charity gala. These were the real, desperate tears of a cornered predator realizing the trap had finally snapped shut. She reached across the massive table, her manicured fingers clawing at the empty space between us. "Felicia, please," she choked out, her voice cracking into a high-pitched whine. "I am your sister. I am your own flesh and blood. You cannot let them do this to me. You know I am a good person deep down. Please, just give me another chance." I looked at her shaking hands. I looked at the dark mascara streaking down her pale cheeks. Years ago, that exact display of vulnerability would have broken me. I would have opened my wallet, made a dozen excuses for her toxic behavior, and let her drain my energy all over again. Today, my pulse stayed completely flat. The air in the room felt crisp and clear. I leaned forward, resting my palms on the cold wood of the table. "You chose to be an extortionist, Clara," I said, my voice steady and entirely void of pity. "The law does not care if we share a last name." She searched my eyes for a long, agonizing moment, desperately looking for any trace of the weak, people-pleasing little sister she used to terrorize. She found absolutely nothing. Defeated and broken, she picked up the heavy silver pen. She signed her name on 4 different lines, pressing so hard the paper nearly tore. The attorney swiftly gathered the documents, legally sealing Lily's safety forever. 2 private security guards stepped into the dining room, their expressions completely blank. They flanked Clara, gesturing firmly toward the front entrance. She grabbed her designer purse and walked out. Her shoulders slumped. The heavy oak doors clicked shut behind her, echoing through the foyer one last time. The parasitic cycle was permanently dead. It took exactly 72 hours for Clara's entire reality to collapse. Once the state of California flagged her device for the fraudulent Child Protective Services report, the legal dominoes fell with brutal efficiency. She avoided state prison only by pleading guilty to a lesser charge of filing a false police report, which resulted in 3 years of strictly supervised probation and 400 hours of community service. The non-disclosure agreement she signed carried a $1 million penalty clause, completely gagging her from ever spinning her twisted victim narrative on social media or in the press. The social fallout was absolute. The elite circles of San Diego talk, and they talk fast. After her theatrical meltdown at the charity gala, she was permanently blacklisted from every major social event and high-end venue in the city. Her wealthy acquaintances blocked her number overnight. Unable to afford her luxury downtown apartment without someone else footing the bill, she was forced to liquidate her designer bags and move out of the county. The community that once tolerated her saw the absolute truth, and they shut her out completely. 6 months later, a letter arrived in my mailbox. It had no return address, yet I recognized the looping, frantic handwriting immediately. It was 4 pages of classic Clara. She offered no apologies for trying to ruin my career. She took no accountability for attempting to extort $50,000. Instead, she wrote exclusively about her own suffering. She wrote, "You have to help me. I am still your older sister. We are family. You cannot just erase me." Years ago, reading those words would have sent me into a suffocating spiral of anxiety. I would have agonized over it for days, plotting ways to fix her life. That afternoon, I stood in my sunlit kitchen, holding her desperate manipulation in my hands. Anger never materialized. Sadness stayed far away. Only a profound, quiet indifference remained. I folded the letter in half, dropped it directly into the paper shredder, and went back to making lunch. When I walked into the living room, William was sitting on the thick rug, reading a storybook to Lily. She was giggling, pointing at the colorful pages, completely safe and entirely oblivious to the chaos that had almost swallowed her. William looked up at me, his eyes crinkling at the corners, offering a warm, steady smile. It was a quiet, grounded kind of love. The kind that never demands a performance. The kind that protects. We spent that evening planting flowers in the backyard. My hands were covered in cool dirt. The ocean breeze was blowing through my hair. And for the first time in my entire life, my shoulders carried zero weight. I looked at the life we were building, brick by brick, relying entirely on mutual respect and genuine care. This is the reality of a true family. It is never an obligation. It is an active, daily choice. I want to speak directly to you for a moment. If you have listened to my story this far, I know exactly why you are still here. You know, Clara. Society conditions us from the time we are children to believe that family is an unbreakable, sacred bond. People tell us that blood is thicker than water. They insist that you must forgive and forget. That you must always leave the front door cracked open for a toxic parent, a manipulative sibling, or a parasitic relative simply because you share the same genetics. But I am here to hand you the hardest, most liberating truth I have ever learned. Rule number 1. Blood is just biology. It is nothing more than a random roll of the genetic dice. Respect, loyalty, and safety are the only things that actually make a family. DNA is never a free pass for abuse. If someone has to constantly remind you that they are family to justify treating you terribly, they are not acting like family. They are acting like a predator holding you hostage. Rule number 2. Silence is not peace. I spent decades of my life biting my tongue, picking up my ruined dresses, and paying the heavy emotional tolls for my sister's chaos. I truly believed that by keeping the peace, I was keeping our family intact. I was entirely wrong. Enduring a toxic person quietly does not buy harmony. It simply funds their next attack. It teaches them that your boundaries are fragile. Boundaries must be enforced with absolute, unyielding consequences. Rule number 3. The most elegant revenge is not revenge at all. When you finally cut off a toxic relative, the urge to destroy them can feel overwhelming. You want them to hurt the exact way they hurt you. But true justice requires stepping off their battlefield completely. It requires building a life so magnificent, so heavily fortified, and so full of genuine love that they never obtain the security clearance to touch it again. The greatest punishment for a parasite is simply locking the door and letting them starve outside your walls. Is there a name flashing in your mind right now? Is there someone in your life that you keep around out of a sense of twisted guilt rather than actual love? Do not let shared DNA become a life sentence to misery. Grieving the family you wish you had is painful, yet holding on to the family that destroys you is fatal. You are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to protect your peace. Share your story in the comments below. Let go of the shame. It is time we set ourselves free. I am Felicia, and I am finally free. Why did Felicia wait so long? Why on earth did she let Clara into that beautiful mansion after years of stolen money, public humiliation, and constant emotional drain? Listen to me closely. If you have never been trapped in the web of a toxic family member, it is incredibly easy to judge. But Felicia was not stupid. And she was not weak. She was caught in a psychological trap known as the slot machine effect, officially called intermittent reinforcement. Think about how a casino works. A toxic sibling or parent does not treat you terribly 100% of the time. If they did, you would walk away without a second thought. Instead, they give you just enough crumbs of normal, loving behavior to keep you hoping. You keep pulling the lever, enduring the manipulation, praying that this time, you will hit the jackpot and finally get the loving family you deserve. But here is the street-smart truth. The house always wins. The only way to survive is to stop playing their game and walk out of the casino. And that is exactly what Felicia did. Once she recognized the game, she shifted from being an emotional victim to a tactical survivor. Let me break down her financial and legal self-defense strategy, because these are moves you need to know to protect your own life. First, she mastered the art of building the case. When Clara locked the doors and threatened to throw herself down those marble stairs, Felicia did not scream, panic, or try to reason with her. She simply hit record. Manipulators thrive on chaos and emotional reactions. But out here in the real world, the truth does not matter if you cannot prove it. Your tears mean nothing in a courtroom, but a saved audio file in a secure cloud drive is absolute gold. Second, she used the audit strategy. Scammers, whether they are strangers or your own flesh and blood, hate specifics. They want to overwhelm you with vague guilt in sudden emergencies. Notice how Felicia handled the $50,000 extortion attempt, and later, the fraudulent child abuse report. She did not beg the state worker for mercy. She audited the situation and handed over the guest internet logs. When you force a manipulator out of the emotional shadows and into the cold, hard light of a digital paper trail, their entire illusion collapses instantly. Finally, she executed the buyout. The felony coercion ultimatum was a masterclass in leverage. Felicia and William did not just kick Clara out onto the street for another 72 hours. They engineered a legally binding surrender of custody and a bulletproof non-disclosure agreement. Sometimes, paying for a lawyer to build a ruthless legal barrier is the highest return on investment you will ever get. You are not being cruel. You are buying back your freedom. Here is my final verdict for you today. Your peace of mind is your most valuable financial asset. Do not let someone bankrupt your soul and your bank account just because you share the same genetics. Have you ever had to audit a toxic relationship and cut your losses? Drop down into the comments and share your survival story. We read every single one of them, and your story might just give someone else the courage to walk away. If this breakdown helped you see your own worth, hit that subscribe button. Protect your peace, stay smart, and I will see you in the next video.